Okay, next we would like to move on to the next session, Merpay Tech Fest. We will move on to the next panel discussion. The three of us will talk about small talk on microservices in the credit area. So we will first briefly introduce ourselves. So I am Giga. My background is finance engineering and cloud operator, and then I moved to Merpay. And I have been working in the financial institution, and I was using advanced technologies such as blockchain. And now I am involved in the credit area to build a new type of credit. And this is Mitu. In Merpay, I am the tech lead of the credit back end. And I started my career as a smartphone engineer. And then I joined Origami in 2019. And thereafter, I was involved in finance. I am shuuk. I am manager of the credit ML team. I have been in web engineering, but then I changed my job to AI consulting, and then I joined Merpay as a data analyst and changed to ML engineer. So nice to see you. So this is a panel discussion. So we would like to speak about the story behind the scenes. So if you have any points that you are interested in, please tweet on the Twitter hashtag or YouTube comments. So we would like you to comment or ask questions, and we can answer during the discussion. So starting with the theme. So this is, we have three topics. First is looking back on the credit area microservice, and also the difficulty to draw boundaries in microservices. And also, we will also talk about what we learned from our experiences and failures and mistakes. So first of all, we will explain the products we have been building, Merpay Smart Payment and Flat Payment. Merpay Smart Payment and Flat Payment is a credit card-like service. It's a credit service. So I think many of you are familiar with the services, but just in case. So it's a very credit card-like service that allows customers to pay for purchases later when they shop on Merpay or use Merpay in shops. So that is the service. And the credit limit is different for each customer. And the job of the credit area is to determine this amount and make it available to the user. So this is the history of the Merpay Smart Payment. In 2019, April, the post-payment of Merpay started. In November, this was rebranded to Merpay Smart Payment. So that was the start. And July 2020, the flat rate or installment payment was started. And then the common QR codes and virtual cards were launched. And in the back end, AI credit. So Merpay is the only provider of AI credit in Japan. So this is using machine learning for credit. And we acquired a license. for that. And we are now in the stage of giving birth to a new type of credit. Using AI, which I just mentioned, in Merpay, based on information from the past, the customer's behavior will become the input, and AI is used to calculate the probability of non-payment to set the limit. So there are two ways to clear Merpay smart payments. So Merpay smart payments and flat rate. So first is paying in lump sum on the following month, bulk payment, or you can also pay a fixed amount each month. From the customer perspective, it's only the change in how the payment is made, but in the background, the legal category is different. So this is stipulated under different rules. And in case of flat rate payments, it is required by law to refer to the data with an organization that holds nationwide credit and loan information and calculate the credit limit based on that. And Merpay credit area microservice. So how is this constituted? So I would like to touch on that, on the structure. So what is microservice in the first place? And the viewers might already be familiar with this, but just in case, I would like to explain. Microservice is a service suite which can be deployed or released independently and which are separated by business domains, and services talk to each other via the network. And one service might work as a service, or there are other services which work together. And these separated units, so monolith is a system where multiple services are combined together. This type of code, transaction or ID payment, these are the image of the payment areas of Merpay. This is actually more detailed, but these are the types of units of our payments. This is just to give you an image. And next, why do we adopt microservices? So generally speaking, there are two purposes on using microservices. Number one, to ensure the scalability through the independence of each service. And also we can increase the speed of development, and parallel development will also be possible. And on top of that, there are multiple microservice units. So each team can have their own jurisdiction on what method they will be using. And the second reason is you can assign the different domains to different teams. If the amount of domains or resolution or the size that one team can handle is limited, so we can separate the domain into smaller areas so each team can be more focused. And in Merpay, in the initial phase of the development, many engineers have been building the finance domain in parallel. However, things got very complicated, so we needed to separate the system. So that's why we adopted microservices. And this is the direction that we are aspiring for. This is the configuration that we are aspiring for, and there are majorly 4 parts here. First is the credit scoring. So this is the credit score, which does the AI scoring, and also the credit line, which calculates the amount. And on the top right, this is the smart payment applications and management.
And on the bottom, regarding the regulation and laws, the information refer to the CIC or the calculation of the credit lines belonging to the microservice. So then I'd like to look back the history of the system, and I hope you can learn something. And in each phase, what kind of issues we have and had, and what kind of learning we had. I'd like to share those with you. As I said earlier, Merpay Smart Payment was launched in the April through May timeframe of 2019, and then a flat rate payment was made the next year in July. And I'd like to share with you what happened in each time. So release launch of the Merpay Pay Later service or post-payment service. We use the machine learning model to calculate the credit rating, and also we created the flow. It was just a one-time lump sum payment on the next month. And then we built the system to calculate the credit rating. And I'd like to show you what was the system structure. It's pretty simple. It may look, but why did you decide on such structure? I'd like to ask the engineers. Okay, let me explain. There are 2 major characters. They're using the machine learning that we calculate the credit line for the customer, which is a credit score, and also the right area is a deferred payment where offering the pay later service. So credit score created the credit score, and then because of course it has to be periodically calculate the credit line on periodical batch. And on top of that, we add the real-time processes because we want to make a judgment on the ages or the flow on the real time. So we have the modification logic on the real-time system as well. So yes, based on the calculated credit rating by the model, so you calculate the real credit line. So it's a simple structure. So you may not have the big issue, but what was the challenge is, yes, we thought it's simple. But once we launch it in the market and then get the reaction from the customers, and then we wanted to add some functionalities, and then so it was a huge periodical batch. It was a rule-based processing, and it's different from the machine learning areas, which is the strength of the machine learning engineers. So it was difficult for the machine learning engineers to keep running. For as a backend, once we start the operation, or actually it was a difficulty about the microservices themselves. The validation information for the real time, the information held by the deferred pay need to be acquired from the other services. But those other services, may not be able to handle all the number of the requests, and therefore we had to use a different method to get the information. So that was related to the microservices themselves, nature of the microservices. So it was a very first system that you built. So probably, yes, you must have faced the challenges. But then you added the flat rate payment and so forth. So let's talk about the launch of the Merpay Smart Payment, the fixed amount payment. So what happened at that time are two things. So we needed to have the flow that is in compliance of the installment selling regulation, and also that you have to calculate the credit limit considering the loan situation from other companies. So now I'd like to show this system diagram. We have more actors or more areas. So would you briefly introduce what are the important points, Mitsu-san and Shuuki-san? Okay, I will comment on this. At this time, what was important was the CSC inquiry was mandatory, which was huge point for backend system. The CSC related parts are shown indicated in the red characters. From the default pay, the CIC inquiry request comes, and then credit info will actually conduct the CIC inquiry. But this request from the default pay and also the request from the periodical batch are different from each other. And also the credit limit calculation was within the periodical batch, but now that we have to also refer to the result from the CIC inquiry. So, therefore we had to refer to the multiple sources, and so the logic have to exist in the multiple places. So we used to have the existing architectures to calculate the credit line, and then we also at the time wanted to reduce the development efforts. So we separated the calculation based on the credit rating and the calculation based on inquiry result from the CSC. So the credit score, the periodical batch exists in a credit score, right? So what was the impression, what was the thinking of the credit score team? Well, the periodical batch was pretty heavy. But now we have to be compliant with the regulation, and we have to create the logic to select the CIC inquiry. So it would be a huge batch. So on the ML side, it was too much effort to operate. So we asked the backend system team to do this. But then for the backend system, the very complicated protocol has to be analyzed for CIC inquiry. So it was a very difficult. Yes, it is relating to another challenge that I am going to talk about next. Yes, please talk about another challenge. Yeah, I see some smoke or the bumps blowing up. So would you talk one by one? The one in the center is the periodical batch. Yeah, the explosion of the periodical batch was huge. This periodical batch was a problematic part in the architecture. What happened was that this periodical batch was suspended in the air. So the both ML people and the backend people had to get involved. So it was sort of suspended in the air. So this periodical batch was modified by the machine learning team in the past, but so maintenance has to be continued. But the ML team alone cannot do the maintenance, and the backend teams cannot do the maintenance either. So, like when we need to modify, we assign the people, members from both teams temporarily and did the work, and that situation continued about a year.
The ML domain and CIC inquiry domain. So these are very big. And also, we needed to do the periodical batch, which goes between these two. So the cognitive burden of each team was increased through this. And this will be a tentative team doing this. This periodical, back then there was no owner to continue updating or maintaining this periodical batch. So there is a temporary team taking temporary measures. So the situation was quite bleak back then. Shuuk-san, did you have something to add? So there was no clear owner defined. So there has been some work which was not performed, and also that led to arguments and quarrels, and that was really covered by individual efforts, but it could not be solved really by the organization. This temporary team for each project is an ad hoc team which will just dissolve after the release. I don't know if they dissolved or not. It seems that they just did the release and then just left. If we had fixed members, we would know the history and how things went. But people change. So it will be difficult to catch up on what happens in the past. And also, if we fixed this way of doing things, it would be too dependent on each individual. The one reason why this did not become too serious is that it was only myself and Shuuk-san doing this back then. So everything was completed within our two. It worked. So it would have been more difficult if we had to assign this work to someone outside these two, and this would also incur more cost. So this was supported by two professionals. Thank you for that. From here, so you have gone through lots of struggles to realize the flat rate payment. So I would now like to talk about the future. So what you intend to do going forward? There are two items. First is to organize a team which can be accountable for calculating the credit limit calculation. And next is to organize the complicated logic and workflow. So how did you come up with these topics? Of course, you mentioned that the owner was not clarified, but about complicated logic and workflow. So what exactly was the problem? So if you can go back to the previous chart, this regular batch or periodical batch, we started with trying to establish a team for that. So what was the role of this periodic batch? The one big role was calculating the credit limit. And the owner of this domain was missing. So that's why we try to organize a team who will be responsible for this calculation of the credit limit. And based on that, we found that the existing flow had lots of waste and there are too many communication paths. So that's why we wanted to really streamline that. And about calculating the credit limit, there were 3 types of stakeholders here. So we had to really talk to all of these 3 teams. So that resulted in high cost of modification. And also, there was a different domain which was involved in the CIC reference. So the business domain was not really cleanly centralized. So even if you had microservices, unless they can connect very well, this did not work. I see. So based on this, moving forward, it's shown here. So there will be 4 stakeholders here. So first we have credit line. So this, which will calculate the credit limit, has newly appeared here. And also, they will receive the results of CIC inquiry and use that for the calculation. So I would like to hear about this portion. So what is the philosophy behind this? So this is just as I mentioned before, the calculation of the credit limit will come under one microservice called the credit line. And this calculation, by confining this credit limit calculation into one microservice, that communication path became much more simple. And maybe this diagram is too abstract, but by moving to this configuration, the API request route has become very clean. And another big point is that the credit scored can now focus on credit prediction. And before, so this is very close to our ideal situation. Shuke-san, anything to add? You mentioned everything I wanted to say. So I think this final status is very nice, but I think you have gone through lots of difficulties, and I would like to hear about that. Back in the flat rate, you have faced lots of problems, I heard. And you have done many things to solve these problems. So what kind of challenges did you face, and how did you counter them? So it's exactly as it says in the slide. So once after we acknowledged the problems, about 6 months after we recognized the problem, we could not really get a good timing to talk about the problem. We have Shuke-san and Giga-san here, so I started with talking about such risks and problems with people around me, and at what timing can we talk about these risks of violations of regulations, of reputation risks? So we started with starting to talk about that, and as a consequence, we were able to bring in stakeholders like CTO. And Shuke-san actually put this together at the end, so this went well. So you talked about everything I wanted to say, but it will. So we cannot do. Engineers cannot do everything. We need to communicate with other people like the business team. And we need to talk the business language, such as reputation risks or legal risks. Yes, we actually talk to many teams around the company. So it is very difficult for other people to understand the gravity of the issue. Back then, we were not working as a team. So the project was centered around the PM, but there was no PM.
Because it was a temporary team. So, we asked that assign somebody as a PM, and then Giga-san joined the Merpay. And so now that, it became easier to run such kind of project. Yes, that we thought it was a great timing that the Giga-san joined because he was a very good candidate for project manager. So, yes, for the microservice team, right? Yes, exactly. So, okay, we looked back the history, and so now what was the learnings, and what are the points that you reflect? There are 3 things, right? Okay, let me briefly explain. There are 3 points. The first point. So the boundary between the development domain and the technology domain is not enough. We had a pay later release and the fixed amount payment release. So for the pay later domain, it was small, so the development of technology domains alone was enough. But now, and so the ML team focused on the ML, and the backend focused on the backend. But but we need to structure the one domain with the different organization, like including the not only ML and the backend, but also the business. So, and second point is the boundary was shifted because of the end date driven activities, and yes, we increased the requirements with the tentative requirements, and so and of course it wasn't the absolute bad thing, but we had to understand that we would have the technology debt, and so we had to make sure that we will solve them. And also the owner was missing for the domain, so which was bad. Yes, we need to have the system and to monitor periodically, and also we had to get the feedback from the bottom up with the bottom up approach. Feedback on this project. Yes, probably you didn't come up with the final version from the beginning. You did the try and errors, but then you didn't have ownership, and also you tried to draw the boundary from you based on what you want, but it didn't work, and also everybody was busy, so you had to assign the tasks to the different teams, but then since the project was dead and driven, so it didn't work. Thank you very much. So what's about this? Is this about a book, some kind of book? A Team Topology is a book which is quite famous. So how to draw the boundary of the systems or the teams are described. And based on multiple viewpoints, the boundary can be drawn. So if you are interested in, please check it out. But I wish that it was published back then, but it wasn't published back then. Yes, I haven't read this yet, but I will make sure that I will read this book. And are we getting any question? Since we don't see any question now, or maybe we can proceed. So this is a message. Okay, lastly, do you have any message to the audience? Like how to draw the boundary for the microservices or your outlook for future or what you want to do in future? Okay. About microservices, different from the class design, you have to involve the people and organization. And there's no single answer, single right answer. So you have to go through the certain trials and errors. But on the other hand, if you already know the anti-patterns, and then you can avoid the issues to define the structure of the system. So I hope that our information will be useful for you. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, from me, as Shuke-san said, yes, there is no single correct answer. But this was an example of a credit limit. I strongly feel that the microservice sounds like a very engineering topic, but as a company or as an organization, we have to have an attitude to make it work. Of course, the bottom-up approach is important, but also the top-down approach is important, which was very good. So we were able to be heard. We were able to be heard very well. I'm not sure whether this was a good example, but I hope that you can learn something from this presentation. Thank you very much. And I want to briefly make a point to summarize. I myself, in the history of a Merpai smart payment, it was good for me that I was able to learn that there were a lot of events happened in a Merpai smart pay history. But then everybody worked hard in order to launch the system and made the system as much as possible to what they want. And regarding the credit line, there is a credit line for individuals as well as enterprises or companies. So there's no single answer to it either. And there's no single answer in a microservices domain as well. So we have to proceed with the uncertainty. And so I'd like to have the strong ownership and mission so that we will, going forward, complete the development in future when the project happens. Okay, it's just about a time. So I guess there's no question. So yeah, I don't see any question from the audience. So since it's time, so we'd like to conclude this session. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.